The number on Maria's screen crossed $1,000 for the first time in her life, and her husband's response was to ask if she'd remembered to grab dish soap on the way home. 28 years. 28 years of quietly saving for this exact moment, and it arrived indistinguishable from every other Thursday. No fireworks, no champagne, no black card sliding across marble. Just two people in a kitchen with a chipped countertop. One of them now technically a millionaire, both of them thinking about dinner. My name is John, and I've spent an unreasonable amount of time studying the exact moment people cross this line, because almost nobody tells you the truth about what's actually on the other side of it. So here's the question sitting underneath this entire video. If Maria is a millionaire now, why does absolutely nothing about her life feel like that word is supposed to feel? Leave a like and let's get into it. Here's the thing about that word, millionaire. For about 100 years, it was the finish line. It was the yacht, the private island, the guy lighting a cigar with actual cash. Your grandparents heard millionaire and pictured a completely different species of human being. That image is still burned into all of our brains, which is exactly the problem, because the number stopped meaning what the picture means a long time ago. Let's run some math that might ruin the fantasy a little. $1 today doesn't buy what $1 bought a couple decades ago. Nobody's shocked by that. But run the real numbers and it gets uncomfortable fast. $1 million today buys roughly what a little over $500,000 bought back in the year 2000. Go back to 1980 and today's million has the purchasing power of about a quarter of that. So when your uncle talks about millionaires like they're royalty, he's remembering a word from a time when $1 million could buy 4 times what it buys now. The word never changed. The math underneath it quietly did. And the culture already knows this, even if it won't say it out loud. Because here's a number that should stop you cold. When you actually survey people and ask how much money it takes to be considered wealthy, the answer isn't $1 million anymore. It's over 2 million. That's more than double the number Maria just hit. The finish line your grandparents worshipped is now, according to people living today, less than half of what it actually takes to feel rich. Maria crossed a line the culture moved decades ago and forgot to tell her about. She won a race and somebody quietly relocated the trophy. It gets worse the closer you look, too. Break that wealthy number down by generation, and the younger you are, the higher the bar gets. Ask someone in their 20s what it takes to feel rich, and the number climbs even further past 2 million. The finish line isn't just moving once, it's moving continuously, and it's moving faster for the people furthest from crossing it, which means the entire concept of arriving as a millionaire is built on a definition that expires the moment you meet it. So, what does $1 million actually do for you? Not what does it feel like, what does it functionally, mechanically do? Because this is where people get genuinely surprised. There's a classic rule of thumb for turning a pile of savings into income, called the 4% rule. Take 4% of your portfolio in year 1 of retirement, adjust for inflation after that, and historically, you've got a very good shot at not running out of money over 30 years. 4% of $1 million is $40,000 a year. That's it. That's the income $1 million produces. The man who invented that rule recently said you could probably push it a bit higher, maybe closer to 4.7%, which gets Maria up to around $47,000. But other researchers looking at today's expensive market think the safer number might actually be lower, closer to $37,000. Split the difference, and Maria's million, the number she chased for almost 3 decades, throws off something close to an ordinary, unremarkable salary. Sit in that for a second. 40-something thousand a year is a real budget with real edges. It's still checking the total before you tap the card. It's still deciding the trip to see family happens once this year instead of twice because flights got expensive and the math is the math. Being a millionaire in this scenario doesn't mean prices stop mattering. It means you cleared the finish line and discovered the finish line has a mortgage payment. The anxiety doesn't disappear. It just changes shape from will I ever have enough to please don't let me lose what I built. And it gets more brutal because that income isn't landing in a vacuum. It's landing in a body that's aging. One of the largest expenses waiting for Maria and her husband isn't a boat, it's healthcare. Current estimates put lifetime healthcare costs for a couple retiring today, not even counting long-term care, well into the mid-six figures. A big chunk of that hard-earned million is already spoken for by a future version of Maria who has knee problems and takes 4 medications every morning. The million was never fully hers. It came with a bill attached, and the bill was due before she even knew it existed. But the income problem isn't even the strangest part. Here's what genuinely breaks people's brains when they finally see it. Being a millionaire on paper and having $1 million to spend are two completely different universes. When we say someone has $1 million net worth, we're adding up everything they own and subtracting what they owe. For a typical person who reaches this milestone, most of that number is sitting in two places: the equity in the house they live in and retirement accounts they legally can't fully touch yet. You can't spend your house. You can sell it, sure, but then you have to live somewhere, and that somewhere costs money too. And the money in a retirement account isn't just cash sitting in a drawer. Pull it out too early, and penalties and taxes take a mache to the balance. So here's someone who is, on paper, a millionaire, and if the water heater explodes next Tuesday, she might genuinely have to think hard about whether she can cover it. That's not a contradiction. That's the completely normal reality of what this milestone actually looks like. Look at how this plays out across the whole country, and it gets clearer. The median household net worth, once you include the roof over their head, sits somewhere in the low to mid six figures. Strip that home equity back out, and the median collapses to a fraction of that. Tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. Most people's wealth is a house they're living inside of and can't eat. Maria's situation isn't an outlier, it's the standard. And here's the part nobody puts in the Millionaire brochure. That retirement account has had a silent business partner on it the entire time: the government. If Maria's million is sitting in a pre-tax retirement account, that's not really $1 million. That's $1 million minus every bit of income tax she never paid on the way in. When she pulls it out in retirement, it's taxed as ordinary income, federal and often state on top. Depending on where she lives and how she withdraws it, that $1 million balance might really be worth somewhere closer to $700,000 in actual spendable in-her-pocket dollars. This partner never showed up to a single meeting, never put in a dollar, never once asked how Maria's day was going, and then strolls in at the end demanding a cut of everything. And once she hits her 70s, this partner stops letting her decide when to take money out at all. There's a rule that forces a chunk out every single year, whether she wants it or not, specifically so it can finally get taxed. On a $1 million balance, that first forced withdrawal is somewhere in the high 30,000s, dragged into the daylight and taxed ready or not. Maria spent decades thinking of that account as hers. It was always, quietly, a little bit theirs too. The statement said 1 million, the fine print said terms and conditions apply. Now, here's a piece of this nobody ever puts in a headline because it's not really about money at all. It's about what the money does to the people around you. Call it the friend group tax. The moment people find out you cross this line, something shifts, even among people who love you. Maria didn't announce it. She didn't have to. A cousin mentioned needing help with a down payment. A friend from work joked, not really joking, about how she could probably afford to pick up the check now. Her sister-in-law started saying must be nice about things that used to be just normal life: a vacation, a new car, a nicer grocery cart. None of these people are villains. They're just doing the math the culture taught them. Millionaire equals unlimited, equals guilt-free, equals why not? And Maria found herself doing something strange in response. She started hiding the number. Not lying about it, just not mentioning it. Because the second people knew, the version of her they saw stopped being a tired school teacher and started being a resource. That's a cost nobody puts on the spreadsheet. You don't just buy an asset when you cross this line. You buy a slightly different relationship with almost everyone who knows the number. So at this point, you might be picturing the person who hits this milestone as some flashy high roller who gamed the system. That's where the picture has to be completely rearranged, because the real millionaire looks nothing like the commercial. When researchers actually study people with $1 million net worth, the profile that comes back is almost aggressively boring. The most common careers aren't hedge fund manager or startup founder, they're teacher, engineer, accountant, manager. Most never earned the six-figure salary in a typical year. They just did an unsexy thing for a very long time, saved a chunk of every paycheck, put it into boring index funds, and waited about 2.5 decades. That's Maria, a high school teacher for nearly 30 years, married to a mechanic. They drove the same sedan until it died of old age, then bought a slightly newer used one. By every visible measure, the most middle-class looking people on their street. And 2 doors down is Dave, with the lease he can barely afford, the boat he uses twice a year, and the kind of lawn that requires a guy. Dave looks about 10 times richer than Maria. Dave is also, and I cannot stress this enough, probably one slow month away from the whole thing coming down like a Jenga tower in a mild breeze, because the research keeps confirming it. The people who look rich and the people who are rich are very often not the same people. Wealth is quiet. It's the car that isn't in the driveway, the vacation that never got posted, the watch nobody's wearing. And getting there is brutal, specifically at the start, which is the part that makes people quit. There's a famous line from an investor who said the first $100,000 is a nightmare, but you have to get through it. And he's right, because the math is right. At the beginning, your money grows almost entirely because you keep shoving money into it, not because it's earning anything meaningful on its own. It feels like pushing a boulder up a hill with your bare hands. But once the pile gets big enough, the growth on the pile starts to outrun what you're adding, and the boulder starts rolling on its own. Most people never get to feel that because they quit while they're still pushing. Maria didn't quit. That's the entire secret. It's almost insulting how simple it is. But here's a wrinkle, because a lot of people don't just quit, they actively sabotage the thing. Decades of investor data show the average person earns dramatically less than the funds they're actually invested in. Not because the funds performed badly, but because people panic sell at the bottom, pile in at the top, and tinker constantly. Over a long stretch, the average investor ends up with less than half of what they'd have had if they just bought a boring index fund and left it completely alone. Maria's superpower wasn't picking winners. It was doing absolutely nothing, on purpose, for almost 30 years. She got rich by being the most patient, least interesting person at the party. Now, I know some of you are getting a little annoyed right now. You're thinking, come on, John. $1 million is still $1 million. Most people never get close. And you're right, completely right. And I don't want to lose that, because this is the part these videos usually skip past too fast. $1 million net worth still puts Maria in roughly the top 10 to 15% of households. That's not a technicality. That's the overwhelming majority of working adults never reaching this number, no matter how many decades they work. It means Maria and her husband will never face the specific terror of choosing between groceries and a prescription. It means a bad year at work is an inconvenience, not a catastrophe that spirals into high-interest debt. Compared to where they started, 2 kids of factory workers with nothing handed to them, this is an actual, structural, life-altering achievement, and no amount of goalpost moving should be allowed to erase that. But here's the part that reframes the whole thing. To actually crack the top 1%, the level people picture when they daydream about rich, Maria would need to grow her money more than 10 times over. The distance from broke to millionaire is enormous. The distance from millionaire to actually rich is a canyon most millionaires never cross. She's not at the top of the mountain. She's at a very nice rest stop with a good view, catching her breath. And there's one more quiet disappointment tucked inside that number, especially for anyone hoping to pass something on. $1 million for most people who reach it is not generational wealth. It's barely one generation's worth. Run the tape forward, subtract the taxes, subtract the healthcare bill, subtract 30 years of a couple actually living off the thing. What's left is usually a paid-off house and whatever didn't get spent. That's a real gift. I'm not knocking it. But the fantasy where you hit $1 million and your grandkids are set for for life forever was never a million-dollar fantasy. That number starts a couple of zeros further down the road, which is an uncomfortable thing to learn after you've already run the entire race. And this is where it gets almost sad, because even standing at that nice rest stop, the people who make it mostly don't feel any of it. When you survey actual millionaires and ask if they consider themselves wealthy, the overwhelming majority say no. Only a small sliver of people with $1 million in investable assets will actually call themselves wealthy. Most say they're middle class or upper middle class. Let that sink in. The thing you're chasing, the number, the milestone, the finish line, the people who've already crossed it are standing there telling you it doesn't feel like crossing anything. Why doesn't it land? Part of it is everything we just covered. The money is locked up, taxed, and inflated away, and even the people around you start treating you differently. But part of it is just how the human brain works, and this is a trap that gets absolutely everyone. Your sense of enough is not a fixed point. It moves. The second you hit a number, that number becomes your new normal, your new baseline, the new floor you're standing on, and your eyes drift up to the next one. When Maria made $40,000 a year, $100,000 looked like freedom. When she made $100,000, she started noticing the people making $250,000. There's no amount of money where the brain finally exhales and says, "Great, we're done now, we can relax." The goalpost isn't at the end of the field. The goalpost is attached to your own forehead, and it moves every time you do. And I want to be clear, this isn't a video about rich people, because that treadmill, you're already on it. If you make $40,000 right now, some version of you is certain $70,000 would fix everything. If you make $70,000, you're eyeing the people at $120,000. The millionaire staring at her balance, feeling vaguely unsatisfied, is not a different creature from you. She's you further up the same treadmill, discovering the belt keeps speeding up no matter how far you run. Maria isn't chasing a number anymore. She's been quietly conscripted into chasing the feeling the number was supposed to give her, and that feeling turns out to be permanently sold out. None of this means the milestone is worthless. Maria and her husband are genuinely fine. They have a paid-off house, an income for life, and they will never lie awake doing the truly terrifying kind of math. That's not nothing. That's actually enormous. The mistake was never in reaching the million. The mistake is in what we were told the million would feel like. We were sold a fireworks show and handed a quiet kind of freedom instead. And because we were watching the sky for explosions, most of us don't even notice the freedom when it finally shows up. So a couple weeks after the number crossed $1 million, Maria was standing in her driveway on a Saturday, watching her husband back the old sedan out to go get groceries. Same car, same crack in the driveway he keeps meaning to fix. 2 doors down, Dave was loading the boat onto the trailer again, phone wedged against his shoulder, arguing about a payment. Maria watched them both for a second. Dave, who looked like the millionaire, Maria, who actually was one. And that was the moment it finally hit her. Not at the laptop, not at the number, but right there, watching an old car pull out of a paid-off driveway while her neighbor wrestled with a boat he couldn't afford. The thing she'd spent nearly 30 years chasing had already arrived. It just showed up so quietly she almost missed it, because it never once looked like the commercial. It looked like nothing. And nothing, it turns out, is a lot more than most people ever get. No hype, no guru posing in front of a rented car, just the real numbers. And quick reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This is for educational purposes only. And what you do with your own money is on you. I'll see you in the next one.